The 2025 Formula One season has just exploded again, and this time, the shock comes straight from the neon heart of Las Vegas. Norris crossed the finish line calmly behind Verstappen, Piastri secured a strong P4, and the championship gap looked stable and safe. But moments after the world thought the results were settled, the FIA uncovered a stunning breach inside McLaren's garage, and, in one brutal decision, both Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri were disqualified. The FIA confirmed that both McLaren cars violated the skid block plank regulations, an automatic disqualification, no matter the reason. The discovery has shattered the championship picture, rewritten the standings, and raised one burning question. What really happened behind the scenes? And why did McLaren's secret only surface now? Before we continue deeper into this unbelievable twist, make sure to subscribe, because what unfolds next could completely change the outcome of the 2025 World Championship, and you do not want to miss any of it. The chaos that unfolded in Las Vegas was not just another post-race controversy. It was an earthquake that shook the entire foundation of the 2025 Formula One season. What started as a quiet and controlled evening for McLaren suddenly turned into one of the most dramatic technical breaches in recent F1 history. The FIA's decision to disqualify both Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri was not taken lightly, nor did it come from a mere suspicion. It came from a precise, repeatable, and devastating measurement that exposed something fundamentally wrong with McLaren's setup on a night when they could least afford it. According to the FIA's findings, both McLaren cars violated Article 3, 5.9 of the technical regulations regarding plank wear, arguably one of the strictest and most unforgiving rules in Formula One. The skid block, or plank, must not wear more than 1 mm from its standard 10 mm thickness. Anything below 9 mm results in immediate and unavoidable disqualification. It doesn't matter whether it's accidental, unintentional, or caused by on-track damage. FIA treats the rule as absolute, and in this case, the measurements were crystal clear. Norris's plank showed 8.88 mm and 8.93 mm at the designated points. Even in a sport of margins, this was too far outside the limit to ignore. McLaren insisted that the breach was not intentional. Team principal Andrea Stella issued an apology directly to the drivers, explaining that both cars developed unexpected high levels of porpoising during the race, vibrations so severe that the car bottomed out more violently than expected. But this explanation raised more questions than answers. How could a team that dominated practice and qualifying suddenly face uncontrollable porpoising during the race? And more importantly, how could the same issue affect both cars equally? That is where the theories begin to multiply. The first and most commonly whispered theory in the paddock is that McLaren pushed their setup lower than they should have. Running a car close to the ground increases downforce and cornering grip, giving a huge performance advantage around a track like the Las Vegas Strip Circuit, which rewards aerodynamic efficiency on long straights and stability through fast kinks. If McLaren gambled by lowering the ride height slightly below what was safe, they may have intended to sit right on the limit, but the unpredictable bumps in Vegas, combined with race fuel depletion, may have pushed them beyond it. In short, McLaren may not have cheated, but they may have taken a risk that backfired. Another theory revolves around the mysterious issues Norris reported late in the race. Many believed he was struggling with fuel management, and indeed, the FIA initially focused on a potential fuel shortage investigation. But when his pace suddenly dropped off, the car's behaviour changed, and this sudden drop in ride height due to low fuel load could have accelerated the floor wear significantly. If the plank was already marginal from earlier porpoising, the final laps may have been the breaking point. This would explain why both cars crossed the line legally on fuel, but illegally on plank wear. A third theory, more technical but increasingly discussed, is that both cars suffered subtle floor damage. Stella mentioned accidental damage discovered after the race. Damage to the floor or the mounting points could cause it to move differently under load, increasing the impact on the track surface. But here lies the key issue. The FIA has heard this argument many times. It doesn't matter whether the damage is accidental or not. The car must always be compliant at all times. So while McLaren offered it as an explanation, the stewards had no choice but to dismiss it. But the most interesting theory of all is the one no one wants to say too loudly, that the Las Vegas track surface may have exposed a weakness in McLaren's suspension setup. The Vegas circuit, with its street surface bumps and cold temperature grip changes, produced unpredictable oscillations in multiple cars last year. If McLaren's 2025 car was particularly sensitive to these frequencies, it may have bottomed out far more aggressively than expected. This would mean the fault lies not in the drivers, not in the setup gamble, but in a deeper aerodynamic flaw that McLaren failed to identify earlier in the weekend. Regardless of the cause, the consequences are enormous. Before the disqualification, Norris held a comfortable 30-point lead over Piastri and a 42-point cushion over Verstappen. The championship seemed to be his. Now, that security has evaporated overnight. With both rivals tied on 366 points and only 24 behind Norris, the title fight is wide open. And what makes this situation even more volatile is the psychological impact. Verstappen, a driver who thrives under pressure and chaos, now senses weakness. Piastri, meanwhile, finds himself unexpectedly revived in the title hunt, knowing that one strong weekend in Qatar could turn him into a genuine contender. And let's not forget the strategic implications. The Qatar weekend includes not only a full Grand Prix, but also the final sprint race of the season. 58 points are on the table. Norris can still mathematically seal the championship in Qatar, but only if he outperforms both Verstappen and Piastri across the entire weekend. If he falters, even slightly, the fight could extend to Abu Dhabi, where anything could happen. The ripple effects don't end there. With the Vegas results reshuffled, George Russell inherits P2, and young Kimi Antonelli grabs a surprise podium, a confidence boost for both Mercedes drivers as they look to end the season on a high. And while McLaren has already wrapped up the Constructors' title, their aura of invincibility has cracked. One mistake, whether intentional or accidental, has opened the door for Red Bull and Mercedes to claw back momentum. In the end, this Las Vegas disqualification is not just a technical footnote. It is a pivotal turning point, a moment that might be remembered as the spark that reignited the 2025 championship battle. Whether McLaren recovers from this blow, or whether this becomes the moment Verstappen or Piastri seizes control, will be determined in the next 2 race weekends. So, with only 2 race weekends left and the standings tighter than ever, the biggest question of the season finally comes into focus. Who will emerge as the 2025 Formula One World Champion? Will Lando Norris recover from this devastating blow and finally claim the title many believe is his destiny? Will Oscar Piastri capitalise on this unexpected lifeline and shock the world with a late-season surge? Or will Max Verstappen, the man who thrives when chaos strikes, pull off one of the greatest comebacks in modern F1 history and secure his 5th consecutive crown? Who do you think will be the 2025 F1 World Champion? Verstappen, Norris or Piastri? Let me know in the comments section. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our other interesting videos.
In 2026, Formula One cars might have to downshift on a straight at full speed just to keep the car from dying. And that is not a joke. That's what top drivers are worried about. The sport is about to go through its biggest change in decades. In 2014, F1 introduced the V6 turbo hybrid engines. Many fans hated them at first. They were quieter, more complex, and they started one of the most one-sided eras in F1 history, the Mercedes era. But they also pushed technology forward, and F1 is doing it all over again. Only this time, the changes are even bigger. The cars will be powered by 50% electricity. The battery will be just as important as the combustion engine. Overtaking won't be about a simple DRS button anymore. It will be about a high-speed chess match of energy use. This is more than just a new set of rules. It's a gamble, a high-stakes experiment to completely redefine what a Formula One car is. So what exactly is changing? Why is it so radical? And why are drivers like Max Verstappen actually concerned? Since 2014, F1 power units have been hybrids. They use a gas engine combined with two electric motor generators. The MGUK, which recovers energy from braking, and the MGUH, which recovers energy from the turbo's heat. But electricity has always been the extra power buddy. Right now, only 18%, about 160 horsepower, comes from the hybrid system. The gas engine provides over 800 horsepower, about 82%. The electric motor helps, but the gasoline engine does most of the work. If the battery system fails, a driver can still race. They can still battle for position. Look at Daniel Ricciardo at Monaco in 2018. His hybrid system partly failed early in the race. The man lost about 20% of his total power. On any other track, he would have been forced to retire, but with incredible driving and Monaco's tight corners, he held on and won. It was a heroic drive. In 2026, a drive like that will be impossible, because the entire power dynamic is being flipped on its head. F1 is forcing a 50-50 split between the engine and the battery. Both parts of the power unit will have to deliver an equal amount of power. The numbers are shocking. The power from the gas engine will drop from over 800 horsepower to just 540. Meanwhile, the power from the battery system, the MGUK, will jump from 160 horsepower to nearly 470. This isn't a small adjustment, it's a complete overhaul of the car's heart. Lose your battery in 2026 and you're finished. Half your power is gone in an instant. You wouldn't just be slow, you'd be a sitting duck. So why is the FIA doing this? Two big reasons. First, sustainability. F1 wants to be carbon neutral by 2030. They need to show the world they are serious about green technology. Second, relevance. The car industry is moving toward electric. Automakers aren't interested in spending hundreds of millions on old-school gas engines anymore. F1 needs to stay relevant to car companies to survive. By pushing the limits of hybrid tech, F1 hopes to attract new manufacturers like Ford, Audi, and Cadillac, who have all signed up for 2026. It's a way to keep the racing fast without going fully electric. But this new 50-50 world creates a huge problem. To deliver that much electric power, the battery needs to be constantly fed, and that's where things get really strange. To make this work, F1 is changing how cars collect and use energy. Right now, a car can only recover a certain amount of energy from the brakes each lap. In 2026, that limit is being increased by more than 4 times. On top of that, the MGUH is being completely removed. That's the part that cleverly recovered energy from the hot exhaust gases of the turbo. It was a complex and expensive piece of tech, but it was a great way to generate power without relying on braking. Without it, the car has only one way to charge its massive new battery: braking. This changes everything about how a driver approaches a lap. They won't just be braking to make a corner, they will be braking to harvest energy. Driving styles will have to be completely rewritten. We'll see drivers braking in unusual ways, changing their racing lines to find the best spots to recharge, and using their engines in ways we've never seen before. This all came to a head when Max Verstappen tested a 2026 car in a simulator. He tried driving a lap at Monza, one of the fastest tracks on the calendar. His feedback was alarming. He said that to be fast, he had to go flat out on the straights, but then downshift while his foot was still to the floor. Think about that. Downshifting at full throttle. In the simulation, the battery drained so quickly on the long straights that the car couldn't hold its top speed. The fastest way to keep accelerating was to drop a gear to get the engine back into its power band. It's a move that goes against every instinct a racing driver has. It's the kind of thing that would cause massive damage to a real gearbox. Verstappen called it terrible. If that became the normal way to drive, F1's fastest tracks would feel broken. The FIA heard the feedback and made a change. Instead of the electric power just switching off when the battery hits zero, they introduced a ramp-down system. At high-speed tracks, the power will slowly fade over 7 seconds. At other tracks, it will fade over 3.5 seconds. This gives the driver a warning before the power disappears completely. It smooths out the performance drop. But the problem isn't gone, it's just hidden a little better. Drivers will still be fighting a car that's constantly threatening to run out of juice. But what about overtaking? With all this focus on saving energy, will drivers even be able to race each other? Since 2011, F1 has used the drag reduction system, or DRS. A simple button that opens a flap on the rear wing, reduces drag, and makes passing easier. Some fans love it, and some hate it. But in 2026, DRS is gone. Replacing it is a brand new system called manual override, and it adds a fascinating layer of strategy in wheel-to-wheel racing. Here's how it works. The car in front can use its full 470 horsepower from the battery, up to a speed of 290 kilometers per hour. After that, the electric power starts to fade away. But if you're the car behind and you're close enough, you get an extra boost. You can keep your full electric power all the way up to 337 kilometers per hour. This boost is the override. It's an extra shot of energy you can use to attack. Unlike DRS, which you can only use in specific zones, you can use this override anywhere on the track. You could use it to launch an attack into turn 1, or you could save it to get a better exit out of a slow corner, or you could use it to defend. It turns every overtake into a tactical decision. It's a chess match at 335 kilometers per hour. Do you use your energy early to surprise them, or do you wait, bait them into using theirs and then counter? This could finally fix one of F1's biggest complaints: boring, predictable passes. But the changes don't stop there. The way cars take corners will be different too. With the MGUH gone, drivers and engineers will be searching for any way to get energy back into the battery. This has led to a very weird idea. As legendary car designer Adrian Newey pointed out, we might see drivers revving the engine hard in the middle of a slow corner, not to go faster, but to spin the engine and use it like a generator to charge the battery. Imagine a car screaming its engine through the slowest hairpin on the calendar, like at Monaco. It's a completely bizarre concept. We may see cars that sound louder in places where they used to be quiet. The entire rhythm of driving is about to change. Among all these huge power unit changes, one other thing's happening that could be even more important in the long run: fuel. In 2026, F1 will switch to 100% sustainable fuels. This fuel won't come from oil drilled out of the ground. It will be created in a lab from things like bio-waste, or by capturing carbon from the air. But why is this important? Because there are over 1 billion gas-powered cars on the road today. We can't replace them all with EVs overnight. If F1 can prove that these new synthetic fuels work, it could help create a cleaner alternative for everyone. It could change more than just racing. It could have a real impact on the world. Let's be realistic though. New engine rules always bring pain. In 2013, the last year of the old V8 engines, there were only 27 retirements from mechanical failures all season. In 2014, the first year of the hybrids, that number more than doubled to 54. Teams just hadn't figured out the new technology. The cars were incredibly unreliable. Expect the same thing in 2026, if not worse. The first few races could be a war of attrition. We'll see failures with battery cooling, with the new brake-by-wire systems, and with the software that ties it all together. Just finishing a race will be a victory for some teams. And that brings us to the biggest question: who will get it right? When the hybrid era started in 2014, Mercedes nailed the formula. They built a power unit that was so much better than everyone else's that they dominated the sport for years. It took rivals like Ferrari and Red Bull almost a decade to truly catch up. The same thing could happen in 2026. The team that finds the perfect balance between the engine, the battery, the aerodynamics, and the weight will have a massive advantage. The teams that get it wrong could find themselves stuck in the midfield for years to come. This isn't just an update, it's a total redefinition of Formula One. Electricity will be just as important as the gas engine. The future of Formula One will be won and lost with watts, not just horsepower. In 2026, the electrical battle begins. If you've enjoyed this journey, there's plenty more to come. This sport never stops evolving, and neither will our content. I'd appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
With the 2025 Formula One season coming to a close, and F1 making its way into the new regulation period with cars already being built and pretty much ready for testing, we're going to get 2 separate cars, one for the private test and then another for the public test where the car will look much better, have more downforce, and they'll know where they can actually gain more time due to reliability concerns. We can talk about teams and what's been going on, who's ahead for this next regulation period based off of rumors, some insiders I have, going over news articles, and what we already know about the teams. The time is very close for these cars to be shown, and while there is a lot of BS mixed in, and you can never really truly know till the cars hit the track and we see who's quickest based off of the timesheet, there's no fire without smoke, and a lot of the drivers have spoken: Leclerc, Hamilton, Max Verstappen, Lance Stroll, Fernando Alonso. We're going to be using what the drivers have spoken about as well and discuss it in this video, going over every team, who's ahead. If you're new here, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Would mean the world to me. Getting close to that crazy goal that I've always had. So thank you all for that. Let's get started with the video. First engine we're going to speak about is Audi's. Now, we've recently seen their R26 concept car, where the Audi project showed off its kind of livery without really the sponsors. And this car is somewhat of a model. Binotto has gone on to speak that the car itself has the basic aerodynamic features of their current car that's in the wind tunnel, but will look much different both in January and in February. He said the car that we'll take to the track for Barcelona test will be very different from the one to debut in Australia. They will try and understand the car, the interaction between chassis and engine, and energy management for us is also important, saying the version we'll bring to the test will in any case be far from the final one. And that's mainly for reliability concerns, seeing as these are new engines, and for Audi, their first engine in Formula One, which is a huge deal. Binotto has gone on to speak a lot about how the engine and downforce correlate a lot with weight, and it'll be very important to figure out this collaboration to get a perfect balance at the start of the season. Audi has already gone on to announce that 2030 is their goal of winning a championship. In 2026, he said whoever reacts best will win, will be ahead in 2030, which are some bold words. In 4 years is ambitious, but a start for the Audi team. I've read rumors somewhere that they're only down about 30 horsepower, which is a lot less than I expected. There were reports earlier where Audi was down drastically and they looked like they were going to be the back marker of the grid. Could that still be the case? Yeah, very possibly. But from what Binotto's been speaking, there's definitely more hope now for the Audi team and fans in general. As he's gone on to speak, the changes have also been designed to be in line with completely sustainable fuels. Patience will be needed at the beginning because big changes can lead to disruption. We've seen that plenty in this regulation period where big upgrades come, completely ruin the balance of the car. Now, when you're working on a power unit and the chassis itself, if you take a wrong turn somewhere in the simulations, that could be a big hit for probably the rest of your season. So while Audi doesn't look like the best car, it surely doesn't look like it's going to be the worst. It looks like everything's going to be pretty close. With that said, we're going to go into Red Bull Ford. Now, I do have some inside information here. I can't completely speak about what I know, but there are some things to say and big improvements that have actually happened on the Red Bull Ford design. It's going to be very interesting to see what they do with the chassis design because right now it's not an Adrian Newey car. It's going to be made by Pierre Wache, and we'll see what direction he goes for, whether both drivers can drive it or it's still just going to be a Max Verstappen car. Now, as for the engine, Wache has spoken and said it looks very, very promising. In the beginning, they were having issues just like every other team. And from what I've heard, these issues have been resolved. And while it isn't their goal to win straight away, because this still is going to be their first engine design made completely by Red Bull themselves, not just in collaboration like with Honda. Of course, with Helmut Marko and Max being on that team, the ambitions are going to be high. I've not heard any numbers on the Red Bull Ford, whether they're about 30 HP down, 30 HP up. And those numbers usually relate on whether they're down or up to the Mercedes engine, who seems to be the favorite as of right now. And even Red Bull and Max Verstappen have gone on to say that he thinks in 2026, Mercedes will be the quickest car, based off the experience they've had and everything that he's heard around the paddock. There's a couple of other things I'm going to mention later on in the video about Mercedes. It's a lot of positive things, very little negative about the Mercedes car and their engine. But for Red Bull, I'm hearing much better things than I did earlier in the season. And a lot has came out about them making upgrades in 2025, sacrificing 26. But in reality, it's been old parts. They haven't really been put through the wind tunnel and just in simulation. So they're not really sacrificing too much of 26. We already have a release date on when we're going to see the car/livery, which will be in my hometown, so hopefully I get to go see it. Now, speaking about the Ferrari team, there's a lot of mixed signals coming from the team in Italy. Now, the guy that was making their engine in the start was Zimmerman, who ended up getting picked up by Audi. And apparently the reason why Ferrari quote-unquote let him go, I think it was more of a leave by himself. But let's just go along with what most of the articles are saying. Zimmerman was released due to the reliability of the Ferrari power unit. There have now been recent reports, per usual, calling the engine revolutionary. Somewhere in the intake, it's a revolutionary design. You know how Ferrari likes to speak, and especially the Italian media. And now we've also seen that their Project 678 is going to be running a push rod in the rear suspension. So while the car is very close to done, the power unit itself has been going through reliability testing, and Leclerc and Hamilton have said the car's taken great steps in the right direction for their driving and the way that it feels. That was quite the opposite reaction we got from Charles himself in Silverstone. But now towards the end of the season, he's given more positive thoughts and feelings towards Project 678. And the Auto Racer IT themselves have came out and said Ferrari will not be the favorite for 2026, which has kind of been aligned with what we've been hearing. It's supposed to be more gradual than just right away, so we'll have to see if that's truly the case. Now looking at the team in green, this was a team that kept a lot behind closed doors. Very hard to get information from them, but a lot has came out in the most recent couple of months. Obviously with Adrian Newey being the tech guy over there, it's gonna be a car that aerodynamically will probably work phenomenally. But now, as of most recent reports, Honda's engine is closest to Mercedes, and it's supposedly them two up at the front, the aerodynamics will make the difference. That's how close it is. Some insiders from Aston Martin, like Carlos Miguel, has said he's been getting positive messages from the Aston Martin car for 2026. And then he also went on to speak about saying that he's getting positive messages about the Honda engine, not like in the McLaren era. Where even from preseason testing, we heard that engine was behind in deficit. They had to end up changing so much of the components to make it work in the chassis. It was quite the mess over there at McLaren. They've learned from their mistakes. Clearly, they've been probably the best engine in this regulation period where everything's been frozen. Adrian Newey's been stuck at work and has spoken a lot about working as a team, getting into a trance working on the car, and the amount of effort going into the 2026 car. They even ended up firing some big engineers over there at the team, like Eric Blandon, who was a big contributor to Mercedes' fastest cars. Not the main guy, but a guy that did help a lot. But in recent times, he's kind of made a pretty okay-ish Aston Martin car. Definitely could have been better, and a lot of upgrades failed under him being either the head guy or right under. So they've pretty much kicked out most of the people that have really not done well on the upgrades over there. Dan Follows, Eric Blandon, and a couple of other engineers, with Adrian Newey and then obviously Enrico Cardile being the head guys. Andy Cowell also has spoken a lot about this being very positive and them wanting to fight directly in 2026 for a championship. A lot has also been spoken about the drivers making a big difference in this regulation period, not it just being down to the car. So it'll be very interesting to see what a very adaptable Fernando Alonso can do to try and win his third at this very young age. Last team to speak about, which is probably the giant for 2026, is the Mercedes car. Now, I chose to speak about them last because mainly from rivals, we've heard how good their engine is going to be. But they themselves have not came out and spoken a lot about it. There's not many rumors. All the rumors that do cover the engine are just saying it's going to be the fastest and quickest. Nothing about what they're actually doing to get it to that stage. But Toto Wolff has been very positive to this regulation period, not wanting it to change. And if we're to believe the drivers and team principals, it does seem like Mercedes has a bit of a buffer on the rest of the grid, Honda being the closest. A lot of people don't speak about it, but James Allison is a very good technical director, and it's not been spoken about a lot, especially with McLaren being so ahead in the aerodynamic department. But it looks like Alpine, using the Mercedes engine, will already do a test before we even get to the January tests, doing a little shakedown on a track with its car already prepared. They were one of the teams that completely abandoned 2025. Williams and Aston Martin pretty much as well have all abandoned that 25 car to focus on 26. And everything is pretty much made and ready. Those first cars are pretty much done and they're already working on other plans. We've even heard Audi speak about working on their 2027 and 2028 engine. So we're kind of given an idea of where the pecking order is sitting at right now, with Audi towards the back, but not as far as they were in the beginning of the season when we were speaking about these rumors. And it seems like Red Bull and Ferrari are pretty similar in pace, just based off of the rumors, and Honda and Mercedes seem to be the closest. I guess it's a toss-up between the two of them. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Obviously, we're not going to know till they hit the track. I'm only speaking about this because of all the information we've gotten surrounding it, and as I said, they're only rumors till they become true. A lot of this was coming out before the 2022 regulation period. We saw that Ferrari ended up being the favorite and Red Bull was still really strong as well. So let's see what actually becomes true. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Please leave a like, subscribe, it'd mean the world. and peace.
The immediate impact of the disqualification was seismic. Norris, who had finished second on the road, and Piastri, who had originally crossed the line in fifth before gaining a position due to Kimi Antonelli's penalty, were both removed from the final classification after FIA technical delegates measured the rearmost skid wear on the MCL 39 and found it below the minimum 9mm thickness. The regulation is black and white. Anything under the limit is illegal, intent is irrelevant, and the penalty is disqualification. McLaren argued mitigating circumstances, the unexpected porpoising caused by the track, the limited practice time due to weather, the shortened Friday running, but the stewards dismissed all of it. The FIA did, however, note that they believed the breach was unintentional, but unintended or not, the consequences were enormous. The points reset that followed was arguably the most dramatic twist of the season. With Norris left on 390, both Verstappen and Piastri now sit tied behind him on 366. Suddenly, what looked like a straightforward run-in for McLaren became a three-way knife fight heading into Qatar and Abu Dhabi. The problem for McLaren is that this wasn't a freak administrative error or an ambiguous interpretation of the rules. It was a fundamental aspect of car legality. And as several analysts pointed out, no other team in the top 10 had the same issue. That's where the narrative begins to harden. Scott Mitchell-Malm called it a spectacular blunder, questioning how McLaren failed to anticipate plank wear on a bumpy street circuit. If the team had no clue it was vulnerable, why did they react so late with Norris? And not at all with Piastri? If they did suspect a problem, why did their response differ between cars? Ben Anderson added that the team's inability to stay on the right side of plank legality was now a genuine threat to Norris's title, especially with Ferrari collapsing form-wise and Piastri stuck in a prolonged slump. Val Corunzi was blunter, describing the DSQ as a mistake that could destroy McLaren's nerves heading into a potential final race decider. But the most pointed observation came from Gary Anderson, who noted that the fact both cars were non-compliant shows that even a team good enough to win the Constructors' Championship can still commit basic, costly errors. He emphasised that the momentum is now firmly with Verstappen, and that Piastri, whether he wants to help or not, is unlikely to be a meaningful support to Norris, especially given their clashes earlier in the season. This all feeds into a broader unease about how McLaren have managed their drivers in recent months. From a championship lead of more than 30 points after Zandvoort, Piastri has endured a string of difficult races, crashes in Azerbaijan, no podium since Monza, grid penalties elsewhere, and repeated complaints about being stuck in traffic due to strategy calls that seem to leave him exposed. His performance slump is a matter of record, but so too is the mounting perception that the team hasn't offered him the same level of strategic clarity or support. When asked before the DSQ about the title fight, team principal Andrea Stella made a point of saying that Oscar needs to go into the final two races with the will to win them. It sounded motivational, but in context, it raised eyebrows. Why did this need to be said publicly? Why was the emphasis placed on Piastri proving himself rather than the team evaluating its own choices? And then came the Instagram incident. Piastri's account reposted Bernie Ecclestone's quote, asserting McLaren prefer Norris because he brings more marketing value. It was deleted quickly. Piastri later said he didn't know anything about it and that maybe I accidentally did it. The explanation is plausible. Top drivers often have social media managers, but the timing was almost too convenient. For a fan base already primed to see signs of imbalance inside McLaren, this felt like confirmation, even if it wasn't. If there's one thing McLaren have consistently managed this season, it's creating problems they really didn't need. And in Las Vegas, they outdid themselves. Both cars were disqualified for a technical breach so basic that even midfield teams rarely get caught by it. To many observers, this wasn't just another error. It looked like a team so preoccupied with managing its internal storyline that it forgot to monitor something fundamental. For those already suspicious that McLaren have been quietly shaping the path for Lando Norris's title bid, the double DSQ felt like the moment the entire facade cracked. Everything previously brushed off as speculation, from skewed strategic calls to the resurfaced Bernie Ecclestone comment claiming McLaren prefer the English driver Norris because he offers more marketing appeal, suddenly appeared a lot more coherent, not as confirmed truth but as a reflection of how McLaren's behaviour has looked from the outside. And the harshest twist came from Red Bull's camp. Helmut Marko had openly hinted that Verstappen only needed one major slip-up from McLaren to bring the championship back within reach. He said that before the disqualification, and hours later, that's exactly what unfolded. Marko didn't bother hiding his amusement. In his own words, when McLaren instructed Norris to attack Max, Verstappen responded with one fastest lap after another, something Marko found comically inevitable. To him, the entire situation looked like the consequence of a team trying far too hard to control an outcome that didn't need controlling. With all that in mind, one question now hangs over the entire situation. Is this simply incompetence, or a case of McLaren tripping over their own agenda? Before we dive deeper into what really happened and why this DSQ has detonated so many suspicions, consider subscribing. It helps us grow the channel and lets you stay updated as we unpack stories like this in depth. Las Vegas only cemented the suspicion. On the opening lap, Piastri was hit by Liam Lawson and dropped back, but his recovery drive was limited by a combination of small errors, tyre issues, and being stuck behind Antonelli. He described the race as eventful and said there were a few too many mistakes, but he also pointed out that he was one of the only people who actually braked to make the corner at turn 1. It's the kind of subtle frustration that has crept into his radio messages and interviews recently, rarely aggressive, but unmistakably tired. Norris, meanwhile, had his own drama. The formation lap games between him and Verstappen, with Norris complaining he's taking the piss with how big of a gap he's leaving, may have unsettled him. At turn 1, he admitted he braked too late and messed it up, losing the lead immediately. After that, even before the DSQ, Norris conceded Red Bull were in another league, which brings us back to Marko. His commentary throughout the weekend was revealing. He said Verstappen took the first corner supremely, that the team controlled tyre wear better, and that the setup they chose on good luck turned out to be ideal. But he saved his sharpest line for McLaren's radio message telling Norris to attack Verstappen. And then he hammered in one fastest lap after another, just to make things clear. Marko thrives on psychological games, he always has. And this time, McLaren handed him the perfect storyline, the team pushing Norris into a losing fight only to lose far more than the race. The broader technical picture makes McLaren look even worse. Motorsport.com's analysis highlighted that the MCL 39 setup may have shifted its balance rearwards to extract performance on the Las Vegas layout, making the plank more vulnerable to wear. The track was bumpy, the weekend disrupted, and the ride height window tight. But the other 9 teams managed it. Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc were disqualified for similar offences back in Austin 2023, yet the lesson seems not to have stuck in Woking. With a car as stiffly sprung as the MCL 39, curb strikes, tyre degradation and fuel load all contribute to wear. But that's the case for everyone. It is the combination of all these elements, the technical misstep, the strategic inconsistencies, the psychological noise, the optics of favouritism, that creates the environment where people start talking about McLaren playing dirty. Not as a factual accusation, but as a reading of the pattern. McLaren might argue that the DSQ was simple misfortune, but misfortune repeated often enough stops looking like coincidence. And that's where the suspicion grows. Not because anyone can prove McLaren intended to bend the rules, but because everything around the team right now feels off. The pressure to secure Norris's first title, the visible frustration from Piastri, the public amusement from Red Bull, it all adds up to a story that McLaren can't control anymore. Which leads to one final question, the one the paddock is already whispering. After a season spent managing optics, expectations and internal politics, has McLaren become its own biggest enemy? And will this title slip not because of Red Bull or Ferrari, but because the team simply couldn't stay out of its own way?